Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another week of the Nothing But Nugs podcast, part of the Elevated Pulse Sports family of podcasts by the fans, for the fans, diehards only. Last week, we talked about the Nuggets point guard unit in 2025-2026. We walked through Jamal Murray's season performance, whether or not he lived up to expectations, and then we did the same thing with Bruce Brown and Jalen Pickett. This week, we get to talk about one of the more intriguing position groups of the Nuggets 2025-2026 season, and that is the shooting guard core of Christian Brown, Tim Hardaway Jr., and Julian Strawther back with me to discuss it as per usual. Eric, what is going on, man? Another week.
1 week closer to summer. We've hit Memorial Day weekend, and things are looking up here in the Mile High City. We've got a lot of, I know it's not the Nuggets playoffs, but we've got some Avalanche playoff games. The Rockies are kind of heating up a little bit here and there. Bats might be coming alive, but we're here to talk about the Nuggets.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Lots of very interesting stuff going on right now in the world of Colorado sports. I mean, it's kind of disappointing that the Nuggets are not playing basketball right now. But, I mean, at the end of the day, you still got the Avs. The Avs got the revenge that we needed on Minnesota by taking out the Wild. That was very, very good to see. And, I mean, my Timberwolves, yeah, that's kind of crazy to say. The Timberwolves did not pull through for me and my expectations that I had for them. They lost in 6 to the Spurs, which is mighty unfortunate. But, oh, well, such is life. The Spurs, man, all we need them to do now is take out the Thunder and life will be just dandy, So, yeah.
I think they can do it. There's a part of me, look, I'm cheering for San Antonio in that series, but I'm a sucker for a good story, and I would love to see the Knicks win a championship. So the Knicks is the team I'm going to root for the remainder of this season. Let's see what we can do.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. I mean, even going back to the beginning of this season, I kind of thought that if the Nuggets would be able to get to the finals, the Knicks would be the most likely team for them to face, especially with all the injuries happening out there with Tatum, with Giannis not being on a good team really anymore that can compete in the East, and with a lot of younger teams that just hadn't put it all together yet. Did not expect the Pistons to be this good. Did expect the Cavs to be competitive, and I mean, they were really close. So, I mean, we'll see how it all shakes out. I just don't see them taking out the Knicks in this series that they have right now. But we'll see how it all shakes out. Right now, we got to talk about the Nuggets and this 2-guard unit. So let's just kick it off with our good buddy Christian Brown. All right, Christian Brown started his career on a team that ended up going to the championship. Fun way to start your NBA career, But I mean, he came off the bench. He played really solidly defensively for a championship Denver Nuggets team, and that's kind of been the core of his impact so far in his time in the league. But in 2025-2026, we expected him to take some steps forward, and he just simply did not take those steps forward. Okay, averaged about 32 minutes per game when he did play, 12 points per game, on about 9 field goal attempts, 52% from the field, 30% from 3. 78% from the free throw line, about 5 rebounds per game, 3 assists per game, a turnover, roughly a steal, less than half a block. Overall, a plus minus of 6.6. If you take a look at his general shot distribution, he took mostly 2-pointers, which is not abnormal. Okay, 63% of his shots were from 2-point range, 37% of them were from 3. Most of his shots in general were less than 10 feet from the basket, and the second largest number of shots that he took were catch and shoot shots, presumably from around the 3-point line. That is Christian Brown. Obviously, the most notable thing that people are going to think about Christian Brown for after 2025-2026 is getting a $125 million contract extension and then not staying on the court, playing just barely over half of the season in the regular season, and then not really playing well when he was out there. So, Eric, just in general, what did you think of Christian Brown's 2025-2026 season?
Availability. That is his number one ability or inability for this season. He only played 44 games. coming into the season, the expectation was not that he was just going to be a nice role player. They were looking at him to be the full-time starting shooting guard that could defend at a high level, much like you talked about in that championship run. He does run the floor pretty well. I think last year he was one of the league leaders with regards to fast break points. So he's somebody who does run the court well. They expected that from him. He's a good finisher usually at the rim. Saw a little dip in his 3-point shooting. I think a lot of that's maybe just due to the injury, and he lost that explosiveness. When you have an ankle injury where you're talking about torn ligaments in the ankle, that's what it steals. Is it steals that ability to have that explosiveness, to be able to cut, to be able to make those quick, sharp moves. And you could tell it wore on him. They brought him back. Probably, I think Coach said they brought him back a little bit too early, just because they needed somebody to really solidify that shooting guard position. Bringing him back a little bit too early, ultimately, I think ended up hurting him, because then you saw he had to sit out another couple of weeks after coming back early. And it just never really seemed to fully heal throughout the rest of the year. Even in the playoffs, he was dealing with a calf injury, which, I'm not going to say it's directly related to the ankle, but that's how those type of things work. Is you typically, when something's not fully healed, you typically start to see injuries come up in other places. And I think that's what happened with Christian. But um, you know, for me, I think, he didn't have that explosiveness. We didn't get to see him grow into, I think, what the Nuggets had hoped, certainly after signing that large extension. And I guess I won't say that the jury's still out on him. I think we know what Christian Brown is. Unfortunately, unless he takes a major leap in going into year 4, I think next year, year 5 next year, unless he takes a major leap with his ability to shoot, I think we know who he is. He is going to be a 15 point, kind of max type of guy, 15 to 17 point. That's going to be his ceiling, I think. He's got to play better defense than what he showed to be able to play in the playoffs, certainly. And they've got to be able to, really count on him to be able to knock down open shots. You broke down his shooting profile. It is his 3 points. His 3-point shooting, he shot 30% this year. That's not good enough for a 2 guard in this league, and especially a guy who, he basically does not have a mid-range game. He does not take mid-range shots. So his game is either 3 or finish at the rim and in the paint, so to say. And he's really good at finishing in the paint, but he needs to kick up that 3-point percentage, I think. Looks like we may have lost Chris, but I will keep us going here. Talking a little bit more about Christian Brown. When it comes to, I talked a little bit about his mid-range shot and his inability to really, take a mid-range shot on the season. He really only shot the ball about 30 times. Hey, Chris, welcome back.
My internet decided to just KO me in the middle of your amazing sentiment.
Oh, good. But I was just talking about how really Christian's mid-range shot doesn't exist. It's non-existent. He doesn't have a mid-range shot. So it's really feast or famine with the 3 or finishing at the rim, and most of his finishing at the rim is done on the fast break. He needs to improve in the offseason from the 3-point line, no doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, here's the thing, right? He is probably the definition of a Nikola Jokic merchant, if that's a thing. His entire play style and his entire success offensively centers around Nikola Jokic. He is primarily a guy who lives off of those cuts, those drives to the basket, and fast break points. And so, I mean, for a guy who got a $125 million contract extension 3 or so weeks into the season, it's just a little bit surprising that even knowing what we knew about him, the Nuggets decided to do that because thus far in his career, even aside from the mid-range shots, he has not ever really been a shot creator. He does not shot create. He cannot create anything in traffic. He can't create a pull-up jump shot. You saw him try to do that a little bit more this season occasionally, particularly from the mid-range, but he's just not a jump shot creator. And so that really kind of limits his role in the offense to mostly cuts and back cuts and playing off of those screens. And in that type of fashion, with that type of play style, it's kind of strange that they would commit to him so much money before his fourth year is up, knowing that he still kind of had a decent amount to prove before getting a contract extension in that amount, especially in today's day and age, right? With the cap situation and money being a lot tighter, with the NBA trying to restrict teams from building these sort of super teams that last for 5 or 6 or so years. So, I mean, so many different questionable aspects here, right? He hadn't ever really proved at this point in his career that he could or was really significantly developing into a shot creator in the mid range from the 3-point line. And for a two guard, that's kind of an essential skill. And so that, I think, to me, was kind of the most intriguing element of the fact that he got an extension at that point in the year. And now we're kind of in the situation that we're in now, which is, well, you're stuck with a guy, theoretically stuck, right? I mean, it's a 5-year contract. He could still theoretically improve significantly, but you're currently stuck with a guy who is not the most effective $25 million per year two guard you could possibly have on your team. And so it's a very unfortunate situation. But like we said, he's got plenty of time to improve that. Defensively, I mean, obviously we talked about his defense briefly, but that has been his calling card, right? He's been known thus far in his career primarily as a guy who can lock up pretty much everyone 1 through 2. He can play solid defense on some small forwards, and that's really about it. What did you think of his defense this season? It was kind of on par with his defense in the 2024-2025 season. Not necessarily the best of his career, right around 114 in terms of his individual defensive rating. Did his defense feel like it lived up to the hype for you in 2026?
No, and I think that's just because we didn't see a fully healthy Christian Braun. I mean, I hate to keep coming back to the injury, but this season was an injury-riddled season. You got, I don't remember exactly what it is, but I want to say it's 11, 12 games at the beginning of the season without an ankle injury. Then, pretty early in the season, he hurt that ankle, and then he missed, 38 total games. So we only got to see him play in 44 games. There are spurts where he played well on defense, but you saw he lost that explosiveness. So he wasn't able to challenge people on the dribble. He wasn't able to get his hand in those passing lanes as much as he had. At least that's what it felt like as I watched. Maybe his statistics still, kind of showed that. I think he was right there. He didn't drop off a cliff from years past, but I think ultimately that ankle injury really did a number on his ability to play the type of defense that he wants. So that's where I kind of think, hey, we know who he is. He is exactly what we've described. He's not going to be a super scorer. He's going to be a guy that's going to get you those hard-nosed type of, whether it's defensive stops or running the court type of points. But I think there's some room for growth in there just because he was trending up. If you look at his year over year statistics, he had gotten better each season. And then this year, it kind of fell down a little bit because of that injury. I mean, free throw shooting, I'm not going to sit there and say free throw shooting is the number one stat you should look at. But when he came into the league, he was a 62% free throw shooter. 2024-25, he was an 82% free throw shooter. So he can improve. There is growth there. I hope that what we saw was kind of a little bit of regression from that ankle injury, but still kind of on an upward trending path, because you're right. when you say we're stuck with him, I think that is exactly right. We're stuck with him because nobody's going to take that contract.
Yeah, and you really do have to hope first and foremost that he manages to stay healthy, right? If he can't manage to stay healthy, then it's not really going to matter either way. It's just going to be a terrible contract that the Nuggets are stuck with for the next 5 years. But as far as his health in 2026 impacting his defense, that's probably the best excuse we can give him. It's not even really an excuse. It's just a good reason, right? When you are not healthy in your legs, it's just tough to be athletic. It's tough to be fast. And so for a guy who relies on that, obviously, to stay on his primary assignments as they carry the ball in any given set offensively, that's just really important. And it did feel like oftentimes this year, even after the injury, he just struggled to do that effectively. He just felt like he got caught behind guys. He was not able to stay with guys foot for foot, so to speak, like he had been able to in previous years. It was just really overall disappointing to see him in that situation, right? Because like you said, he's demonstrated the ability to improve. It would have been interesting to see what improvements he would have been able to make throughout a fully healthy season, at least 70 games, right? Not 44 games played. And so, yeah, it kind of feels like Christian Brown's season in some sense is a summary of the Nuggets season overall. It's just the season that could have been, but that we never really got to see come to fruition. So mighty unfortunate situation for Christian Brown. As far as our summary of his 2025-2026 performance, in your mind, did he meet his expectations? And do you want him back on the team in 2026?
So I guess my final verdict is, even though I don't think it was like a disastrous type of season, it was definitely disappointing. And I think he would probably tell you that he was disappointed with how this year ended up. My hope is that kind of lights a fire. It pushes him to get better over the off season, and hopefully next year we see an improved Christian Brown. I would put him as he was below expectation. If that's how we're grading him, I think you have to put him at he did not meet the expectations. If you just look at his numbers didn't match last year's, and you could take the injury aside. His numbers didn't match last year's numbers. And when you sign such a lucrative contract, you expect those numbers to at least maintain, if not get better. You certainly hope they'd get better. Do I want him on the team next year? Well, I'm going to go back to, I think we're stuck with him. I don't think anybody's going to take that contract off of our hands. So for me, I'll take him back, but we really need to see improvements and we need to see growth. And you're right about the injuries. Ankles are tricky. I mean, you see Steph Curry with ankle injuries, and ankle injuries, sometimes people are able to move on and never have to deal with them again. But other times an ankle is something that just continually happens every single season. It's kind of like a UFC fighter. Once you get knocked out, then you can get knocked. It's easier to get knocked out, it seems. Well, with ankles, once you've sprained your ankle, and especially in a bad way, sometimes they seem to continue to pop their ugly head back up. So hopefully that's not the case with him.
Yeah, hopefully it is not the case with him. I'm going to agree with you. I think overall, he did not meet expectations in 2025, 2026. Obviously, the injuries had a major role in that. But at the end of the day, I mean, he lost about 3.5 points per game in terms of his raw average contributions in terms of scoring. His shot percentage dropped by like 6 or 7 points, and his 3-point percentage dropped by about 9 points. So it's a pretty significant drop off, even though he was injured and kind of struggled coming back from those injuries. But overall, yeah, expectations were not met. There's still plenty of potential. He's obviously still a very young player relatively in his career. Is it unfortunate that we're strapped to him with this kind of contract over the next 5 seasons? Yes, it is, especially since you probably want some financial flexibility to build a slightly different, if not significantly different, team of role players around Nikola Jokic based on what you've seen the last 2 or so years. But overall, expectations not met for Christian Brown. Do I want him on the team next year? Yeah, I don't have an issue with him being on the team next year. I wouldn't force him out. Ideally, I would, if I had the opportunity to get a better quality role player, more experienced veteran 3-and-D player who can at least knock down catch and shoot threes at a higher clip, or just put him in some sort of package for another true all-star type of player, kind of like we mentioned last week, maybe a Jaylen Brown type of deal in some sort of 3-team trade to make money work. I wouldn't have an issue seeing him go. But would I try to force him out? No. And since it's very likely that no one's going to want to take that contract, I have really no issue with him being on the team again in 2027. So that is the verdict on Christian Braun. Moving on to, well, from a guy who was kind of very below expectations, Tim Hardaway Jr., man. Let's talk about Tim Hardaway Jr. next, because man, oh man, when they signed him in the offseason, I expected him to be significant quality veteran depth. I did not expect sixth man of the year finalist out of Tim Hardaway Jr. in 2025, 2026. So here's what the good old stats for Tim Hardaway Jr. were in the regular season. Okay, he played 80 games. Not only was he good, he was just durable. He was out there a lot of the time. Averaged about 27 minutes per game, about 14 points per game, 45% from the field, 41% from three on 7 attempts per game, by the way. 81% from the free throw line, 3 rebounds per game, just over an assist a game, just under a turnover a game, actually about half a turnover a game, about half a steal per game, and a plus minus of 2.5. As far as his shot distributions were concerned, he took more threes than twos in 2026. 51% of his shots were threes, 49% were twos. Most of his shots were catch and shoot, the second most being from less than 10 feet. This is Tim Hardaway Jr. in 2025, 2026. Eric, what do we think about Tim Hardaway Jr.?
Look, Tim Hardaway Jr., when he was brought in, it was his role, I think, was clearly defined for him. We need you to come in and be somebody who's going to come off the bench and score and make it so our second team, so we don't have to talk about those non-Jokic minutes. And I think Tim Hardaway Jr. was a home run by the Nuggets. It was, in my opinion, I go back and forth between Valanciunas and Tim Hardaway as to who was the best signing that they had in the offseason. I lean a lot on Val just because it was the first time we ever had a true, real backup center for Jokic. But Tim Hardaway, I think he exceeded all expectations. You talked about it. From 3-point land, what's this? This is what I had written down in my notes. He made 224 threes on 550 attempts. 550 threes. That's a lot of 3-point. That's a lot of shots to get up there. And he shot it at a 41% clip. That's exactly what we needed. We needed somebody who could, spread the floor, punish defenses for loading up on Jokic and Murray. And really, he came in and he provided that veteran scoring that we had hoped we were going to be able to get. Did he come in and play the greatest defense? No, he's not known to be. We didn't ask him to be like a lockdown defender, or, there were times where we did give him the ball. I think that was one of the things that he might have been a little surprised with. We asked him to handle the ball a little bit more than maybe what he had done in the past and what he had been used to. His job is generally not going to be a primary creator. He's a catch and shoot guy. He is a guy that if you get him open space and get him the ball, he's going to knock down the shot. So he was brought in to be that high volume shooter. He definitely was a high volume shooter. We asked him to help that second team and potentially help close games. If we ever needed to have him in there to close games as well. And there were times throughout the season, just due to injury and due to circumstance, that we did have him help close games, and he did a great job. So it was a monster shooting season for him. I think the Nuggets really caught a break with, Hardaway. Like you said, nobody, I don't think, expected 6th man of the year be in the running for sixth man of the year. And the fact that he did, that spoke volumes as to the type of player he is. And the other part about it, for those of you that might listen to our Broncos podcast, one of the things that I like to focus on, whether I'm talking about football, baseball, basketball, whatever sport it is, I like those guys that seem to bring the team chemistry and make that team chemistry better. And that's what Tim Hardaway was. He was kind of a glue guy that it seemed like he was well liked in the locker room. He kind of he fit in with the Nugget players right away, and his job was kind of made easier because of that natural fit. And those are the kinds of players that I really love to see in Denver, and that I like to cheer for. So for me, Hardaway was an absolute home run.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I do. Somewhere out there, my former co-host and still friend Garrett is not fully convinced about Tim Hardaway Jr. But yeah, I mean, overall, I'm going to stick with my boy THJ. He had a phenomenal season. Obviously, he actually had the best offensive rating of his entire career this last year. And I mean, that's just the product of playing with Nikola Jokic in this specific offensive scheme, obviously. But nonetheless, I mean, great offensive year for him. Not such a great defensive year for him. I think it was like his third worst defensive season of his entire career. But overall, I mean, for the price tag and for the contribution you got during a regular season where you really needed depth just because of all the injuries you sustained, especially to your starting shooting guard. I mean, you just needed that. You needed a guy like Tim Hardaway Jr. to be on your team this year, to fit into your offensive scheme, to support your team in a variety of drive and kick situations. And for whatever reason, yeah, I'm not necessarily sure why they used him as a primary ball handler so much. They ran a lot of pick and roll with him. That really wasn't the best situation that we saw him in during the season. It felt like he was, at least with respect to picks, at least it looked like pick and pop was his best situation. He would just come off a pick, shoot it, and he got a good look and knocked it down. For whatever reason, that, especially in the playoff series against Minnesota, was just completely absent, it felt like. And I know that's probably where some of the Tim Hardaway Jr. critics might come in and say, well, okay, regular season, he was all right, which would be a drastic understatement. But in the postseason, he kind of just wasn't there. I mean, he had 16 points in game 2 in that loss. He had 13 points in game 6 in that loss. I mean, all things considered, he really only had that one bad game. That was game 4, where he shot 30% from the field and didn't make a single 3 in 6 attempts. Otherwise, they just didn't really get him the ball as often as they probably should. Otherwise, you would have seen closer to regular season type of Tim Hardaway Jr. numbers. So I think schematically, that's the reason you didn't get more out of Tim Hardaway Jr. in the playoffs than you could have. But I guess that's just me. As far as Tim Hardaway Jr. meeting expectations in 2026, did he meet expectations? And do you want him back on the team in 2026?
I feel like he did meet expectations. Now, I will throw the caveat out there, and I agree 100% with you. If I'm looking at the playoffs, if I focus in on just the playoffs, I would say he didn't swing the series like we had hoped he would. And that I guess would be, I can see the knock, the Tim Hardaway Jr. haters coming out and saying, hey, that's the knock on him. He was great in the regular season, but when we really needed him in the postseason, he wasn't there. He only averaged just under 11 points per game in that series. And what really hurt was the 35% from behind the arc. That was kind of a downer. But as far, my grade on him, I still think he met the expectations that we were looking for. Do I want him back? I think it's going to be hard for the Nuggets to bring him back, to be honest with you, unless he's going to take another vet minimum deal, which I think he probably would. Wherever he signs with, he's probably going to take a vet minimum deal, would be my guess. But the Nuggets are strapped right now. They don't have a ton of wiggle room, and really they need to find people. Like, if we were just looking for an offensive player, he's clearly a guy that could be that. but the Nuggets need help on defense, and Tim Hardaway ain't going to help you on defense. So I would like to have him back, but I can definitely see a path where the Nuggets just don't bring him back because he doesn't give you what they need on the defensive end.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you. So, as far as his expectations in 2026, I think he did meet those. I think he actually exceeded those pretty significantly. We got to give credit where credit is due. Okay. Guy on a veteran minimum contract, even with the reputation he has had historically throughout the course of his career. I mean, he's in his almost mid 30s by the time the regular season was done. You just didn't know what you're going to get out of a kind of guy at that stage in his career. And you got a sixth man of the year candidate out of it. You got a guy who was very solid depth throughout the course of the regular season when you drastically needed it, given all the injuries you had during the course of the regular season. You got a guy who fit really nicely into your offensive scheme, right? Not so much necessarily as a primary ball handler, but especially as a catch and shoot 3-point specialist. Overall, Tim Hardaway Jr. did fantastic. I wish they had been able to scheme up some better offense in the postseason against Minnesota, but I don't think they necessarily had the overall team personnel or health to be able to do that. And so for that reason, I would not blame Tim Hardaway significantly for his lack of performance in the postseason. Although, I mean, there were some times where it felt like he could have created himself some significant opportunities in the postseason series and was unable to do so. But I mean, when you're facing a physical Minnesota defense like the defense you faced in that series, it's just tough to really just push that aside and say, yeah, you just got to do better. So overall, he definitely exceeded expectations. Do I want him back in 2026, 2027? I think if I had to choose, I probably would want him back, but it's just kind of tough. You know, it's tough financially with where the Nuggets are at right now and with their historic tendencies of not wanting to push certain cap-based financial limitations too far. And I mean, coming off of a sixth man of the year award, I'm not necessarily sure he would get a minimum contract. I'm sure he probably would get a little bit more. Now, at that point, it just depends on how the money would be spread out. But I just don't see the Nuggets being able to afford him making a significant amount of money more than he made last year. And last year he made a minimum. So I don't think he'll be able to come back, but I would definitely love him to come back. I would love, honestly, in an ideal world, for him to almost be the starting two guard on this team, just because of the fact that they need someone out there to spread the floor if you're going to have Jamal Murray out there. And Jamal lives in the mid-range. Joker obviously lives in the paint. It's just nice to have a two guard and a three guard who can knock down perimeter shots consistently. Christian Brown hasn't been able to do that. Cam Johnson kind of took a while during the regular season to be able to do that. And Aaron Gordon just wasn't healthy enough to be able to fit into the picture consistently enough. So Tim Hardaway Jr., as a guy who's out there getting upwards of 27, 28, 29, 30 minutes per game, would be fantastic just for that reason. But, oh, well, I guess we'll see how the finances shake out after certain moves are made in the offseason.
We will.
Yeah, yes, we will. All righty, moving into our final player that we'll walk through, the final two guard that the Nuggets had throughout the course of the 2025-2026 season. It's Julian Strawther. Okay, I want to say he was actually our late first round pick the year that he was drafted, or he was drafted by someone else in the late first round and we traded for him. Either way, Julian Strawther has been seen as this guy who has a ton of offensive potential, especially for his size. You know, as a 6'6" two guard, there's a lot that you could kind of work with there. But in 2025, 2026, he didn't really get the opportunities that we expected him to get. He really showed up big for this team when they needed him in the 2024-2025 postseason. But in the 2025-2026 regular season, things just didn't shake out for him. He also had his own injury issues. But throughout the course of this season, last season, he averaged about 9 minutes per game, 3 points per game, 29% from the field, 33% from three. Oh, sorry. This is actually the postseason. This is not the regular season. I gotta give him some better props than this. Now, in the regular season, Julian Strawther, it was 15 minutes per game. Okay, 7 points per game, 47% from the field, 39% from three. Okay, that sounds about right. 81% from the free throw line, about 2 rebounds per game, just over an assist per game, about half a turnover a game, not really much with steals and blocks, a 0.4 plus minus. Okay, so not really much there. As far as his shot distributions, he lived primarily inside the 3-point line, which is strange for a guy who's kind of historically been known as a shooter. 53% of his shots were twos, 47% of them were threes. And most of his shots were actually catch and shoot, with the second most being less than 10 feet. So that is Julian Strawther. What do we think of Julian Strawther, Eric, and his season in 2025, 2026?
I mean, look, I feel like Strawther really needed to come into this season to prove that he could be more than just this theoretical, knockdown 3-point shooter. The expectations, I think, were that he would get actual real rotational minutes, but that he would shoot the ball well enough to be given those minutes, to be able to stay on the floor. And I don't know that he did that. I mean, if you look at his year-over-year stats, if you look at 24-25, now look, there are injuries that come into play here. I get it, but he dropped from 21 minutes a game last season to 15 this season. He dropped from 9 points a game to 7 points a game this season. His field goal percentage did go up. His 3-point percentage did go up. So he's shooting the ball a little bit better. So those kinds of numbers they make you wonder what's happening behind the scenes. What is the reason that Adelman can't trust him enough to keep him on the court? Because you did see stretches, certainly when we look back at the playoffs in 24-25 season. I mean, I think it was one of the game 5 or game 6. I can't remember, but Strawther came in off the bench, and I think he scored 15 points in the fourth quarter in one of those games, if I'm not mistaken. So he has shown the ability to kind of be that microwave type of scorer, the guy that can go in there and fill it up when needed. It's at this point, I think it's more about consistency, and really consistency with what the coaches see in the practice, on the practice court, not necessarily in the game. And I think that's kind of where, I'm looking at Julian Strawther and I'm saying, look, if I look at the guys who I think are going to be on this roster next year, who is that guy that I feel like has the opportunity, if he does things the right way, to maybe take that leap, kind of like a Peyton Watson did this year? And I think Strawther really is somebody who, I'm not saying he will do that, but I think that he is somebody that the Nuggets front office looks at and says, we've put a lot into you for 3 years now. We expect, hopefully in this 4th year, that we're going to see some results. And I think that they've been pretty patient with him. It's time to either, sink or swim, really, to find out if he can be that reliable young guard type, wing player. I did love the fact, you talked about his shooting. He wasn't just a settle for 3-point guy anymore, which I feel like kind of he fell into that role a little bit last year, where he just settled for the 3. Anytime he had the opportunity to shoot the 3, he took it. Well, this year you saw him put the ball in the court a little bit more, and he would take that floater. He has a really nice little floater that he can hit. He has a little bit of a mid-range game, and he's the type of guy who can shoot the ball well enough that I could see him having a really nice, ability to create for himself, whether it's with that floater or being able to hit the open jumper. So I think Strawther is still a little bit of a mixed bag with, what we see versus maybe what the coaches expect. And hopefully, as we kind of, talked about with Christian Braun, how we want to see that leap, that growth. Hopefully it's really the same thing with Julian Strawther. I think he's a little bit more, he's kind of got that lengthier build, right? So he's a little longer. He plays really solid defense too. It's kind of an underrated part about his game that I think really keeps the coaches intrigued with him, is that sometimes it's just his lack of hustle, or it's just being in the right place. Some guys are just in the right place all the time. Strawther's one of those guys who's not always in the right place all the time. And if he can turn that around and fix that, he might be able to turn into a solid two-way player, with a solid defense behind him.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, this is true. I mean, it kind of feels like at this stage in his career, he does need a similar type of opportunity that Peyton Watson kind of got around year 3, year 4 of his career, the last few seasons. He didn't really play much the first few seasons of his career, but then finally got more consistent opportunity. He wasn't necessarily super consistent when he got those opportunities, but he started to grow into it, and he eventually became the guy who we saw last season when he was healthy. So something similar is what you might ideally hope for with Julian Strother. I mean, like you kind of said, he had a really solid overall season. All right, he had the best offensive and defensive ratings of his career in 2025, 2026. And so, I mean, if you can't retain a guy like Tim Hardaway Jr. this offseason, I think Julian Strother kind of becomes the guy you slot into that new role as your sort of sixth or seventh man off the bench who is primarily out there to go and get you buckets. Now, as far as his play style is concerned, yeah, I mean, he can kind of just score from anywhere on the court. He's got a decent shot when it's on. He's got that little floater, like you mentioned. He can finish really nicely, actually, funny enough, on the fast break. Even though he's not necessarily the biggest, strongest dude, he finds a way to get that done too. So, I mean, there are a lot of offensive aspects of his game to really appreciate. As far as his ball handling, that's also pretty solid. I mean, they tried at least at points earlier in the year, or maybe it was in the preseason. They wanted to give him an opportunity to be a more point guard type of guard. That never really ended up being the case, it felt like. But I mean, it goes to show how much they think of his ball handling ability and ability to be a primary guy who can operate the bench unit at a bare minimum. And so it'll be interesting to see, with him having one more year under contract, just what exact opportunities they give him in 2026, 2027, especially given the point in his career that he's at and the fact that he's actually kind of been a guy who has shown up for them huge when they've needed him to do so. So I guess the consistency aspect is kind of what he needs to build a little bit more of. He didn't start the season necessarily the greatest. All right, had some pretty poor outings at the beginning of the year, but he also had some outings during the course of the season where he dropped 20. He had at least 4 20-point games during the course of the season, a few scoring outputs in the upper teens. So, I mean, it looks like it's just mostly an opportunity for him and to see if he can improve that defense, right? Because if he's not going to be a good enough defender of guards primarily, then it's just tough to get him on the court, especially considering in 2025, 2026, they had Bruce Brown out there. You obviously had Christian Brown, and you had Tim Hardaway Jr., who all kind of did something that Julian wasn't consistent enough at doing. So we'll see what he does in 2026, 2027. As far as his expectations, did he meet expectations in 2025, 2026? And do you want him back on the team in 2026, 2027?
I mean, I think he had a good regular season for a young player, but the postseason also ultimately told the truth about him. He still is kind of at that where he's looked at as having promise versus going out there and proving that he can do it. I think that as far as expectations, it's really hard to say because there wasn't a ton of like super high expectation for him. So I think in the regular season, he probably met expectations. I certainly don't think he exceeded expectations, but if we kind of look out further and we include the playoffs, I definitely do not think he met the expectations when it came to playoffs. I mean, he barely played. He didn't get any minutes, and maybe that was kind of more of a. It probably spoke a little bit more to what the coaches didn't think he could do. So, do I want him back on the team next year? Because I think Tim Hardaway Jr. will probably go somewhere else. I think you're right. He's somebody who we have signed. He's still under a rookie contract, if I'm not mistaken. And they, I think, foresee him hopefully stepping into kind of that sixth man or that backup two guard that can score off the bench, during that when the second team is out there. So I think he's regardless of whether I want him or not, I think he's going to be on the team next year, unless he's packaged in some sort of deal, which he could definitely be an intriguing piece to a trade package, because he is still a young guy. He does clearly have some upside to him. So, who knows? Maybe a team would be willing to take a risk on him.
Yeah. So I'm going to agree with you. I think that he kind of overall was right around his expectations in 2025, 2026. It'll be interesting, obviously, to see the opportunities he gets next season. But so far, I mean, he's been steadily improving just over the course of his career. He got about 6 or so fewer minutes per game in 2025, 2026, and he still managed to improve in terms of his shooting percentages, in terms of his offensive and defensive rating. So despite the fact that he's not getting consistent opportunities, he's still steadily improving as a professional player at the 2 guard position, or just at a combo guard position. It depends on how the Nuggets want to use him. But as far as that's concerned, I think that he met his expectations. Do I want him back on the team in 2026? Again, agreed. I think that he'll probably be on the team in 2026, so it doesn't really matter what I want. But if I had the ability to get rid of him or keep him, I think I would probably anticipate not being able to pay for Tim Hardaway Jr. And so, given that I can't afford Tim Hardaway Jr., given that I know that Julian Strawther has come through for this team in big situations the last few seasons, and that he's been steadily improving offensively and defensively, I think there's an awful lot to like there that would make me want to give him a chance to be the team's backup 2 guard next season. I think that would really be the situation I would want him back in. I don't think I'd want him back on this team if he's just going to sit as a 3rd string, because that it doesn't feel like a good use of roster space at that point in time. Does that make sense? It feels like you could, at that point, if you didn't want to give him a consistent opportunity, you could just package him up in some sort of deal, even if it was to shed salary and just improve the team in some way. But if he's just going to sit on the bench, I mean, it's just not a good use of value, unless you're anticipating having another injury-riddled season, especially at the guard position, in which case, I mean, that might make some more sense. But I don't think anyone goes into the season with that anticipation. So, yeah, we'll see how it all pans out. But I'm kind of more of a Julian Strawther fan than I am not. And so for that reason, I would like to see what he might have left in the tank, especially if Christian Brown is still struggling next season to develop a shot. You have to have a guard who can go out there and create shots for you off of Nikola Jokic, who isn't Jamal Murray, right? He can't be the only guard who does that on this team. So Julian Strawther has that potential. I'm excited to see what he could potentially do next season. But yeah, that's my general summary of Julian Strawther. Any other final takeaways about the shooting guards for the Denver Nuggets in 2025, 2026, or what you might want out of the unit in 2026, 2027?
Yeah, I think, to me, unfortunately, and look, it's not on any individual player specifically. I think injury probably had the most to do with this. I know Tim Hardaway exceeded expectations and he had a great year. But to me, the shooting guard spot was probably the position group that I was most disappointed in. Just from an overall standpoint of, I felt like the Christian Brown injury really hurt them. It really hurt, not just on the offensive end. We clearly had enough offense to cover up those injuries. We were still, the best offense in the league. So it wasn't on the offensive end. Where it really hurt us was on the defensive end. And for a team that has been trying to, throughout the Jokic years, improve on the defensive end, because look, we all love Nikola. He's probably going to go down as a, top center of all time, potentially, certainly, probably top 10 NBA players of all time when all things are said and done. But he's not a great defensive player. He's not a rim protector. He's phenomenal at getting his hands in passing lanes and things like that. But when it comes to protecting the rim, or, those blow by type of drives, his feet aren't quick enough. Usually he's not going to be the guy that goes out there and blocks a ton of shots or, just protects the rim. So we need to find other people that are able to do that. And a lot of times it's going to start at the guard position. And I think when we lost Christian Brown for all those games, that's where it really impacted us the most. And I think that that's something that as we turn the page into next season, they really have to try to identify guards that can not just, handle the offensive role, whether that's a 3-point, knockdown 3-point guy like Tim Hardaway proved to be this year, but they really need somebody who's going to be able to be either an on-ball or off-ball defender that can really affect how the other team's guards play, because we saw it in that Minnesota series. Their guard play just absolutely killed us. And if we're going to be a team that relies so heavily on Jamal Murray throughout the regular season, we know what that's going to do to him when it comes to the postseason. So we've got to be able to take some of that pressure off of him and have some of our other guards step up to be able to play the type of defense that we saw get played against us in that Minnesota series. So I don't know who those guys are specifically. I really haven't done a whole dive into who's available quite yet, but I think if I'm in the Nuggets front office, and I have, I know they don't have an open checkbook, but if I had an open checkbook, that's what I'm doing, is I'm looking for guys that can go out there and play, not just play strong on the offensive side, but really can stop the ball on defense. And to me, that's where it will make the biggest impact on this Nuggets team.
Yeah, those are some good final takeaways. As far as my final takeaways about this group, I mean, I think the Nuggets shooting guard group, just like I said earlier, is a perfect summary of the Nuggets overall season. It's the group that you look at and say, what could have potentially been if certain things had gone a different way. For Christian Brown, what would have happened had he not gotten hurt so frequently and for such long periods of time during significant portions of the season? Would he have been able to turn into the guy who could have developed a more consistent shot, who could have still played rather high quality defense more consistently than he did during the course of the season when he did play? For Tim Hardaway Jr., what could have happened in the postseason had they been able to scheme up some better offensive sets and get him some more familiar looks in the flow of the offense? Would that series have gone slightly differently if you got closer to 15 or so points per game from Tim Hardaway in about 30 or so minutes per game? For Julian Strawther, what could have been had he gotten just more consistent playing time in some way throughout the course of the season? It's just a season where you look at this group and you say, yeah, this is a very strange group. I mean, you can kind of say this about the point guards too, but it just felt like the guys in the guard core overall were just very polarized. They were either really good at offense or significantly better at defense, and there really wasn't a balance between those two. And so the Nuggets have a very interesting guard group. They have a very interesting shooting guard group going into 2026, 2027. It'll be interesting to see what moves get made there. I mean, when you look around at some of these other teams that are still playing in the playoffs right now, as we're in the conference finals phase, I mean, you look at a team like Oklahoma City, you have Lou Dort, you have Cason Wallace. These are guys who can knock down threes consistently. If you think about Lou Dort, a 3-and-D type of player. If you look at San Antonio, you got a guy like Stephon Castle, who's improved as a shooter, but is definitely more known for being a bigger guard who can get in there, is very athletic, and can throw up down some massive dunks. And so, I mean, this is kind of what you're looking at, especially since the Western Conference is the conference the Nuggets have to find a way to get out of, because the next few seasons, it looks like you're going to have to play Oklahoma City and San Antonio in order to get to the NBA Finals, because those two teams are just young and they've demonstrated that they are the best teams in the conference. What two guard do you need in order to compete with those teams, knowing that they actually do have quality two guards who can do things that high quality championship teams need their two guards to do? So it's just a tough situation. What the Nuggets do to try and create a more competitive advantage when you look at some of these other teams they're competing against in the Western Conference to get out of the Western Conference and back to the NBA Finals to play presumably a weaker Eastern Conference opponent should they get that far. But it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens in that regard. Any other final thoughts?
No other final thoughts. Looking forward to watching some games over the weekend, and hope everybody enjoys their nice Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see how it all shakes out. Obviously, we're going for the Spurs, right? Who are you going for in that Eastern Conference series, though?
I'm 100% behind the Knicks. I'm all Knicks all day.
Yeah, Cavs and Knicks. Okay, yeah, fair enough. I mean, it's tough to be the Cavs and just let game one slip out of your hands that way, right? Oh man.
What's really funny about that is, so I've been like a closet Knicks fan for a long time. I'd never go out there and really like cheer for them, but I always have this. I'm a Bronco fan first and foremost, so I hate New England. Right? I don't like the Patriots. I don't like Boston. I don't like the Red Sox. So anytime I can cheer against them, I think that's kind of what drew me to the Knicks. And so we were doing the Bronco podcast on Tuesday. I didn't watch any of the game. I go out after the podcast is over, and I go out and I turn on the game, and I'm like, they're down 25 points in the fourth quarter or whatever. It was 23 points or something. And from the second I turned it on, the Knicks were a completely different team. They went on like a 28-1 run and took the game over. And I was like, I just needed to watch. So sometimes that's the life of a fan.
Yeah. The New York Knicks need to send you a care package of some sort. Sounds like You're the one who's responsible for that whole situation turning out the way it did. Yeah. Oh my goodness, man. Yeah, you love to see it. Cool. Well, we'll see how the Knicks do. We'll see how the Spurs do. And we're rooting for that high-powered NBA Finals performance. Actually, how did the Knicks do against the Spurs in the regular season? Knicks.
Good question.
Spurs regular season. How did that shake out? Oh, man, it did not pull up the results. Let's go to AI mode. Obviously, AI mode is very reliable. Wow, they split. They split. So both teams won their home games, but the Knicks won the NBA Cup game that they played. So interesting. Technically, the Knicks beat the Spurs in the season series if you factor that game in. That would be a very interesting finals. I'm not going to lie. We'll see how it pans out. But yeah, I'm excited for it.
Yeah, it should be. Look, both conference finals, I think, even though Cleveland's kind of in a hole right now, down 0-2, I think they have the firepower to get back in. The Knicks have to go and win on their home court. So we'll see what happens in that series. And then I think, when it comes to OKC and the Spurs, if you're a basketball fan and you're not watching that, then you're missing out. I don't know what you're doing. That is must-watch TV for any NBA fan, in my opinion. Those two teams are so evenly matched, and you got guys out there. Look, I don't necessarily appreciate the way that Oklahoma City plays, but they are the best at it. So you can't argue that. And the Spurs are here for it, and they're here to give them everything that they have. So that's a super interesting series. And you have, I don't know how tall Wemby really is. They say 7'5", but there's times when he's out there where it's like he feels like he's 8 feet tall, and he's amazing to watch.
Yeah, he's so great. We love to see it. We've been blessed with an amazing conference final situation. So please, if you're watching this episode, go watch those games this weekend and enjoy yourself. But till next week, we will see you then. Have a fantastic week. And we'll be back to talk about the small forward group of the Denver Nuggets in 2025, 2026. So you're not going to want to miss that episode. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Till then, take care and peace out.